So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to hit your long irons, hybrids and fairway woods from the ground so that you can score better on the golf course than ever before. Now, very often when golfers come and see me and they're struggling with their long irons, hybrids and fairway woods, the first thing I want to do is see them hit a short iron. So I've got 8 iron in my hand here, and many golfers will stand up, get that ball position nice and central, decent posture, make a swing, and we see a good shot, solid strike like that. I always like golfers to understand how that's happened. So when we look at the TrackMan numbers there, we can see the low point of the golf swing's 3.3 inches ahead. The club's travelled down 4 degrees, turned 8 iron into 18 degrees of loft, and then it's carried 147 yards. And most golfers will tell me that, yes, I understand that I need to hit down with a lofted iron. And I think it's important that we don't try and hit down, but if we can understand why we do it so well with a lofted iron, as we get into those technically more difficult clubs to hit, we can really hit some high quality golf shots. So the first thing I'll talk about is when we make our golf swing, the club head's basically moving in a circle around our body. And what we're looking for is once we get to the top of the backswing, we're looking to move our body towards the target so that the lowest point of our swing would be very much opposite that lead armpit. So if the golf ball's in the middle of the golf stance, we can see the club's travelling down, catching the ball before the club reaches its lowest point. So that's why the club's travelling down and hitting ball and then ground. And most golfers will understand that and can get that nice strike. But it's really important to understand that because that low point's ahead and the club's travelling down, they're de-lofting the club a huge amount. So then the challenge, once golfers get long irons in the hand, and I've got a 4 iron here, and I'm not saying this will work for everybody with long iron because you might not have enough speed, but it'll be very relevant for the hybrid and the fairway wood. And I mentioned before about these being scoring clubs. Everyone talks about wedges being the scoring club. But if you can't hit these shots from the ground a decent distance, it takes you too many shots to get towards the green in order to be able to score. So the initial problem I see with a lot of golfers is they start moving the ball position a long way forward, and then the problem would be, even with a long iron, if I move well and my low point was behind the ball, I'm either going to fat it, miss the ground and the club travels up and thin it, or even worse, I might come up a little bit, the club's travelled up lots and lots, and I hit the top. So the initial thing a lot of golfers will say is, right, well, if I at least want to strike my long iron well, if I had the ball in the same place as the 7 iron or the 8 iron, and I made my swing, I definitely know I can get a strike on the golf ball. But then the challenge is there. We can see low point's way ahead still at 4.3 inches, but I've only turned the club into 9.9 degrees of loft. So suddenly it goes a lot flatter, and even though I've got 184 yards carry there, that's more because I generate enough club head speed for that. So what I want you to understand is that if we're able to make that swing and keep all the loft off, what we need to do with a club without a lot of loft is try and maintain some impact. So instead of having the ball in the middle, we're going to just move the ball very slightly forward. So it's still going to be the low point ahead of the golf ball, but not as much. So my 4 iron in this set has actually got 20 degrees of loft. So it's super, super strong. So let's now make a swing with the long iron, ball slightly further forward. And we see there, low point slightly less ahead, a bit more loft at 12 degrees, a little bit higher, and fractionally more carry. Now for me there, I might even say, rather than being just slightly forward, maybe I felt like I'd moved it an inch forward, maybe a couple of inches forward. And then again, make that swing, still feel like I'm going to touch the ground. Taking a divot's fine. We don't want a big, deep divot, but still touching the mat in the studio would be ideal with my 4 iron. So we see 3 inches ahead, again around that 12-degree launch, a little bit more height again, and 190 yards carry. Now, the beauty as well is when that club is travelling down towards the low point, we can see down the line, the club's actually moving a little bit more from the inside, whereas if the club was moving up, we can see down the line that the club's actually moving more left or out to in. Now, I've gone onto my 3 hybrid, so this is 18 degrees, so obviously a different design of club, but I want to treat this very much the same as the 4-iron. So we're going to get that ball maybe a couple of inches forward of centre for me. So kind of somewhere in between my sternum and my armpit. And then again, I'm going to make that little practice swing. Still feel like I'm going to touch the ground. I don't want to be taking big, deep divots, but I do need to make contact with the ground. And again, we're going to make that swing. Just touch the ground. Now there. 5.9 inches ahead, a long way for me, but still 12 degrees of loft, 92 feet peak height, and 211 yards carry. And it's really important when we're swinging that we're getting that interaction with the ground. There was a great video with Tiger about was he taking divots with irons, yes or no, and the same with fairway woods. I'm not saying we need to take a big divot, but like I said, there has to be that little bit of contact with the ground. And I would say with hybrid, you can maybe get away with a little bit more of a divot. But as we move into 3-wood, our ability to control how low the low point is becomes vital. So I think for most golfers, 3-wood's a club that's in the bag that they really want to hit from the ground, but they struggle. And they're kind of okay off a little tee or a fluffy lie. But if we can get you moving correctly with this 3-wood, it really can get that extra distance off the ground. So we've seen that as I move that low point, that ball position forward, all of a sudden now my low point's not as far ahead of the golf ball. So I'm going to keep a little bit more loft on the club, as opposed to if the club's traveling down lots and lots, there's no loft and I'll just hit that along the floor. So I think the concept's great. But because the shaft's long, a lot of golfers find it quite hard to control how low the golf swing would be at impact, and they either fat it or they end up kind of lifting up and topping the golf ball. So we want that concept that when you swing, you just want to feel that the club's just brushing the ground. And if you're somebody who maybe struggles with that just as a concept, I think a great way is not trying to stay down on the shot, because we can see how I'm going to crash into the ground really early. But as you're coming down into impact, feeling that that lead side is moving up and out of the way, and that will stop you burying the club into the ground. So once you can get that feel, like I said, and again, 3-wood might not be for everybody, but we're going to move that ball maybe just inside my armpit. I don't do too much about ball position relative to feet, only because there I'm probably an inch inside my heel in a nice place relative to my body. But if I went wider with my stance, it'd be in the same place with my feet, but all of a sudden this would now be forward. So I tend to say never, when the ball's on the ground, never further forward than your armpit, never further back than your sternum. So just keeps it nice and simple for me. And if we can make that swing, we get that good strike. We've kept that low point ahead. Still 11 degrees of launch angle, even though the 3-wood's got 15 degrees, and 231 carry and 251 total. And it's really important, like I said, these long clubs off the ground are most golfers' scoring clubs. If you can understand that by moving the ball position around relative to your low point, that's going to give you the good strike of ball and then ground. And if with the longer club off the ground, you can make sure you're not getting too deep into the ground, it's really going to take that ball strike into a whole another level and get those scores tumbling down.